The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, midweek editions here at Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Justice is back, Justice Rhody, and you can find all of us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence, at Justice Rhody. And find the show, YouTube or the Hail Varsity Radio Network, Hail Varsity YouTube. Like and subscribe there. Hail Varsity Radio Twitter. Fellas, we'll play a game of What Would You Do to ... guarantee a win in Columbus. Now, I'm not crazy. I don't need drug tested. Don't pass the urine sample container my way. Don't think it's going to happen. I'm just saying, what would you be willing to do? And I pose this. There's a couple of things that are out there. One, would you be willing to eat a contaminated sandwich? One that's been recalled and stopped being put on the menu. I don't know if you want to roll the dice with your own life, but there are some Nebraska fans out there that would do a lot for a win. Maybe do a lot for a second half touchdown. Don't know, but we'll take some of the comments in the stream. The popular show Hot Ones on YouTube, where you take a barrage of questions as the temperature of your wingy wing increases. You've seen a lot of celebs play that game, from Will Ferrell to Scarlett Johansson, where they're reaching for the milk. It just depends on if it's wing 8 or wing 12, because there's, how many is it total? 20?
15.
15. Right? 15.
12, 15.
It's been a while.
I know it also varies because sometimes those stars are on tight schedules, so they cut down the number of wings. You heard the whole thing with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, where he refuses to do it unless they let him do salmon instead of wings, and they're like, that kind of defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah,
he's like, I'll put the hot sauce on it. And it's like, but it's still salmon.
Well, how cold's the offense been? You have 1 second half touchdown against UTEP, 1 second half touchdown against Northern Iowa, 0 second half points against Colorado, 3/4 of a shutout. Now you'll take the 21 against Purdue, 14 total points against Rutgers. That's 0 second half points against Rutgers. And you got 7 in the Indiana game. It's blurred. And I know you were down 14-0, and then you had an answer. You were driving. We can say, hey, they were driving. But in all seriousness, 0 second half points against Indiana. It's beyond a trend. And Nebraska needs to figure out something on offense and be willing and able to run the football. But we'll take your suggestions, what you'd be willing to do within good taste.
I have a take. On
the stream, if it meant Nebraska got out of Columbus with a win. Or we can even lower the bar a little bit. Get out of Columbus with a cover.
Okay, that changes things significantly.
24.5.
That changes things significantly. Because if it's a win, I'll probably go with the hot wings. I've done the Blazing Wings challenge at Buffalo Wild Wings before. I'm pretty confident that no matter which one of these you pick, you're going to have a rough time the next morning in your bathroom.
It is going to be a reenactment of Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
Poor Harry.
Yeah, yes. That's exactly what it's going to be either way. If it's a cover, I might go with the distinctive sandwich from a major fast food restaurant, because it's still going to be a rough Monday show, and I think with E. coli food poisoning, I could get out of it. I could stay home and say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna sit this one out. I'm too sick for this. It gets me out of it Therapy Monday, which, I mean, Therapy Mondays are important, but back-to-back week Therapy Mondays, I'm not sure I could handle that.
Well, and listen, Mike Babcock will be with us. Mike with Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports get his take moving forward in hour 2. Associate Commissioner of the SEC and he's still the pride of Waverly. Garth Glissman, former Husker quarterback, Husker hoopster, man of the NBA, now in the SEC. Garth will join us, and he'll join us on the stream, so you can watch this interview along with Babbers here coming up. So Garth at 5. Evan Bland will join us from the Omaha World Herald at 5:25, and then we'll lock in a Jock Doc on Chris Godwin and that poor ankle. 489-1240, 489-1240. Cliff is in the stream, in the starting 5. He's still in Wilbur. Go big effing red, says Cliff. Love you, Cliff. Donnie is here. The other Dave checks in. And the other Dave has just put the number 3 up, as in let's average 3 yards per play, Satterfield. Shane checking in from Santa Cruz. Shane, thank you so much. Who else is going to the USC game? I don't know, Shane. I know Elijah's headed out there. Grinch checks in. Sexy Grinch, formerly Crew, is here. Great Red Shark. Here's another afternoon to fisticuffs. Just joking. Great Red Shark says Grateful Red is here.
The stream chat's been, based on compared to the last 2 days, the last 2 days have been chippy. Today it seems like everyone's a big happy family, which is nice.
We just started. KG is here. NASCAR Eric checks in. Bo's cat is back. I want back in the game. I miss Lincoln. Adopt me. Most cats get 9 lives. I just get 9 wins. Google me. I love it, Bo. Anonymous is here. If we start firing coaches over press conference answers, we'll end up with a bunch of silver-tongued devils who are otherwise incompetent. Aggressively Average asked the question, do we bring Malachi Coleman to Columbus to help with edge blocking? Good question. Tiger Shark is here. Good to have him. Mr. Erickson checks in. Montana Husker fan is here. Good to have you, Montana Husker fan. Jeff, Brian, Black Hills, Brennan. There are 10 wings, thank you, Jeff, in the Hot Ones Challenge. And I'm asking, what would you do if it meant a Nebraska win on Saturday or cover?
And I appreciate Jeff knowing how many wings there are. The last Hot Ones I watched was Sydney Sweeney, so I was
You and
distracted.
The rest of the world.
I was distracted. I wasn't counting wings.
Yes.
Moving on.
JB is my dad, says win or lose, just booze. That's the old college try. We'll get to more of your comments. But the thing that has stuck in the craw with Nebraska fans now moving into the midweek edition here is just the impact of this loss. And I want to start there. We'll get your guys' thoughts. We'll get our listeners' thoughts as well. But the Indiana loss, the 56-7. I ask this. In college football, you're going to see them. You're going to see Saturdays, and I'm not justifying or saying it's okay. It was an awful performance by Nebraska. They got rocked, and it's even worse because it compounds going to Columbus, where there's real potential for they're just that much better than you. And Indiana's pretty good, so I don't know where I'm going other than you can't have back-to-back just public beatings. That destroys morale, that destroys confidence, and I don't know where the confidence is at anyway right now. And you need this Nebraska team that played Colorado to show up. You need that every Saturday. But you need it this Saturday where there's not any fear and they're just going to go play, and that has been gone. And I think that thing started leaving town after Illinois.
And my fear is not necessarily that this team does not show up on Saturday. This team doesn't have a fight. That's what Searles talked about yesterday. The number one thing he wants to see is fight. If I know anything based on the last 19 games of Matt Rule's tenure is like the times when this team does not fight are few and far between. For the most part, this team has some fight. My concern is this game turns into Colorado of last year in Boulder, where your defense shows up. They have a fight for the first half. The offense shooting themselves in the foot, can't pick up yards, punting the football, turning it over. And it kind of reaches that point in the second half where I mean, I think we can all admit that the game last year in Boulder was probably closer than that final score indicated. It's just
they hung in as long as they could defensively.
That's my concern for Saturday. That's what it turns into. It turns into you hang around for the first half, you show some fight, but the result is still the same. The result is still a lopsided loss for Nebraska. And then you have to ask yourself the question, where does the team go from there? Mm-hmm. That's my concern. It's not that this team rolls over at this point in the season. You're one win away from a bowl game. This team knows the importance of making it to a bowl game. They want to be that team that gets that monkey off their back. That's been one of their goals. They wanted to be a lot better this year. I think they are better this season, but they're still quite limited in what they are. And I think their limits might lead to another lopsided loss on Saturday. And then if it's back-to-back lopsided losses, you wonder, what's the mentality of this team like? If you lose a lopsided game that you even fought in more than the Indiana game, what happens with the mentality of the team?
Well, you just wonder what is the impact? What would the impact be of back-to-back thrashings? And then you go into November at 5-3. There's big concerns to go kind of ride it and go get one or two more wins. You have, and I know I'm sounding way optimistic here, but you have 4 winnable games, or at least 3 in November. You could say 4. You just don't feel good about it right now, though, with the offense.
Well, I'll lay it out. It's like the offense does not look good. You just got beat down by Indiana. If I were to forecast it, and Vegas agrees with me, it's going to be another lopsided loss for Nebraska on Saturday. And then you turn it around in the game following, UCLA. That's the game that we all feel best about Nebraska's chances of coming away with a victory. But do you feel great about it after 2 lopsided losses with the bye week coming up the week after that? Like, the bye week is the chance to recenter yourself. And if it was Ohio State and then UCLA, I think you feel different about that UCLA game. But if you go 0-3 in between your bye weeks, get to another bye week, and now it's USC, Wisconsin, and Iowa, who are all good football teams. I don't think any of them are great, but I think they're all good and they're all dangerous. With USC, it's that offense. Miller Moss, I think, is a really good quarterback. With Wisconsin, they've been picking up. I think they have self-confidence, maybe the most self-confidence of any team left on the schedule aside from Ohio State. And then you have Iowa, who is, Iowa. They're not going to shoot themselves in the foot. They are happy to play a sloppy football game where neither team has any offense. That's where they have experience. That's where they have a hell of a lot more experience than you. That's how they like to win football games, and that's not how Nebraska likes to win football games, clearly. Things get real dangerous in that month of November, despite the fact that it's not Ohio State any of those weeks. But the way it sets up is probably the worst possible way for Nebraska, where it's the best possible chance you have at a win is after what's likely going to be a public thrashing on national television, that big noon kickoff slot against Ohio State.
Well, and you just wonder about this team's resiliency. How long can you keep coming back if you keep getting, dump trucked? KG checks in here, and we ask the question, what would you be willing to do for a win? What would you be willing to do for a cover on Saturday against Ohio State? And KG says, I'd be willing to spend the night with Cindy Crawford. Wow. Not in her prime. I mean, current borderline senior citizen Cindy Crawford. KG.
Taking one for the team.
Apparently so. That's quite hilarious.
Justice, are you leaning towards E. coli burger, or are you leaning towards wings?
The direction I would take would be the hot wings. I like my chances a lot better with spicy foods than I do with potentially bacterial infected cheeseburgers.
But your body has an immune system for a reason, you're young.
I already eat spicy food though, so I have a tolerance.
You've got a tolerance built up.
But yeah, I'd take on 12 wings. They could bring out the Carolina Reaper sauce, and I'd do it for a Husker win on Saturday.
I did actually buy for Christmas one year. I also partook. It was for my roommates. I bought the bottle of the Last Dab from Hot Ones and tried it. It was quite hot. I think it would be especially hot if you just finished eating 9 other hot wings. But by itself, it's not horrible. It's not good, don't get me wrong. It does burn your face off, but it's doable. I've had worse, I guess is what I'll say. Eating the 12 wings from Buffalo Wild Wings, part of the Blazing Challenge, which I came so close on. Just failed. Got really close.
You and your T-shirt quest.
That was bad. And if I had to do 12 of the Last Dab, it'd probably be about the same, but it's not. It's 10, and it works its way up in the spiciness level. They give you milk. it might not be that bad. I'm sure it's not going to be fun by any means, but maybe it's not that bad.
Montana Husker fan chimes in here on the stream. All I ask to see is that a team comes out swinging versus Ohio State and keep swinging until the season's over and go from there. No more playing flat.
That's perfect. Because I think if Nebraska does come out swinging in every game, if Nebraska comes out swinging and plays hard in every game they have left, I do think they'll get to bowl eligibility.
Sure. Well, and you just wonder about the aggressiveness. You wonder about the preparation. You wonder about just the scouting. I mean, Indiana could have still beat you by 17 to 21 points. It looked bad because you kept trying to put points on the board, or all right, you're going to take this lesson all 4 quarters with your freshman quarterback. But it really went nowhere. I mean, it is been emphasized in living time in 4 quarters of football on Big Noon that you need a run game. And you've got to commit to the run game. And we'll see what, if any, adjustments Satterfield makes. We'll see if Nebraska gets aggressive on offense. We'll see if Nebraska gets aggressive on defense. Start throwing the punch versus taking the punch.
Well, as the great Mike Leach said, swing your sword.
That's right.
This team go out there and swing their sword.
We miss the old pirate. Mike Babcock will share his thoughts on Nebraska and their impending doom, dare we say. Coming up Saturday. Great to be with you on a Wednesday. And find us on YouTube, Hail Varsity YouTube. Mike Babcock with us here on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity YouTube. Like and subscribe. Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play the podcast, Hail Varsity Radio. Give us a rating, good, bad, or ugly. Captain is in. The real Matthew is here. The Snitley boys checking in, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. And what's interesting is the real Matthew would do the hot wing challenge. Not many signing up for the E. coli burger in order for Nebraska to get a win Saturday. The real Matthew also says, I'd let Elijah babysit my kids for the weekend for a Nebraska win. Maybe a loss, too. I think the real Matthew just wants to hand off his kids.
Yeah, give me the loss. I don't want to deal with kids for a weekend.
Look at Elijah not taking one for the state.
I'm at the age, like 25, I should probably be like better with kids than I am, but like, nope.
My wife still swears at me. Mike Babcock with us.
What a transition.
For a lot of reasons, my wife still swears at me. But, yeah, you'll see a baby picture of Junior or him, at Fan Day with Joe Papa. As the memory pictures pop up on different social media outlets, and she's like, yeah, you weren't around much when he was young. It's like, I was working. I'm sorry. But love you both. But Babbers, Saturday, man, was rough. And not to belabor that, but first time we've had a chance to say what's up since Indiana. Now here comes Ohio State. Not the first time Nebraska's had a stretch of gut-wrenching loss where they're just embarrassed, and then they've got to go to a playoff opponent on deck. Do you think this can linger? Do you think Saturday lingers the wrong way for Nebraska as they go in this Saturday to Columbus?
Lingers with the players?
Yeah, absolutely.
From what they said at the news conference, it won't. They're going to move forward, but I have to think in the back of your mind going into a game like that where I think that you feel like you got a shot to win the game, and then you just get embarrassed. I think that's got to linger. No matter how hard you try to push it out of your mind, it's there. And then, as you point out, you go right after that to Ohio State at Columbus. I don't know what the mindset is going to be if you go through another experience like that at Ohio State, even though the anticipation for such a thing would be there for people that would evaluate, what might happen.
Mike, there's been plenty of arrows shot this week towards Marcus Satterfield, even towards Tony White. Neither of those guys had their best days as Cornhusker coaches on Saturday. As you look at Ohio State, the talent advantage is clear for the Buckeyes. That's why they're one of the top teams in the country. They are a 5-star factory. They bring them in, they turn them into first-round picks, and they send them off to the NFL. That's what they do. That's what they've done dating back to Urban Meyer, now Ryan Day. Whenever you look at that, the talent differential, is that what concerns you more about this game, or based on what you've seen from Satterfield and White, are you concerned about the coaching potential advantage of Ohio State?
I think the talent probably is a bigger concern for me as I look at it and try to evaluate what might happen. As the coaches are, to some degree, they're doing what they can with what they have. And, I don't want to put all of it on the coaches. I don't want to put all of it on the players. I go with what Rule has said time and again. This is a team. It's everybody's responsibility. It's the coaches. It's the players on offense. It's the players on defense. It's the players on special teams. It's everybody combined. But, that's the one thing that I think is difficult to match up with a team like Ohio State is the athleticism that Ohio State has. And, it's no disrespect. It's to Nebraska. It's just a simple fact that, as you point out, these guys are, Ohio State sends these guys to the pros. This is a program that's well established and is established as a contender for national championships. And Nebraska is not at that level at this point. I think that some people thought, maybe that's the direction Nebraska is moving, and maybe that is. But after you saw the Indiana game, there's a ways to go before Nebraska is going to be in that kind of conversation.
Mike Babcock's with us from Hail Varsity, Hurrdat Sports. Get Mike's bi-weekly newsletter, Mike B. at HurrdatSports.com. And, a lot of the fan base panicking. A lot of the folks want a pound of flesh. And it's not just an instant reaction per se. The way the game looked and played, 56-7, isn't good. But it's been an ongoing issue this season offensively, Mike. Last year was last year where you picked the wrong quarterback in Sims. You made do with Harburg, and they were on the verge of at least getting, to postseason. Didn't end up happening. You come back, you've got a retooled offense with some of these portal dudes you brought in. They're supposed to help bridge the youth versus the experience. They haven't performed consistently. What can you do to jumpstart the offense? And, as painful as the answer was for some Nebraska fans with the run game commitment or the yards per play comment yesterday with Satterfield, at least there's some belief where he may start trying to run the football. It's an efficiency thing, I understand, on his end of things when he's calling plays.
Well, I think it's important that Nebraska run the ball. But I'm not saying that Nebraska can do that. That's the thing. I mean, you can say that this is what Nebraska needs to do, and I believe that's the case. But do you have the pieces that you can put in place to do that? We haven't seen really a running back that has been established yet to this point, to where you could just keep giving them the ball. Thought it was Dowdell. That's kind of backed off that. We had the lost fumble turnover situation. I think, yes, the running game is extremely important, and it also helps your defense because it keeps the defense off the field. You can control the clock a little bit more if you can run the ball. And if you could do that against Ohio State, even if you don't win the game, it's not going to be a massive blowout. It's not going to be 56-7 because you're going to keep the offense for Ohio State off the field if you can run the ball. But again, you got to have the pieces to be able to do that. And I'm not sure that Nebraska does have those pieces.
Yeah, Mike, you kind of brought up something that I thought about yesterday but never quite put into words. Like, Satterfield gets up there and talks about how he needs to do a better job committing to the run. You dive into the stats. Nebraska's averaging just about 35 rushing attempts per game coming into this game against Ohio State. That includes a day against Indiana where you didn't run the ball all that much, so it was higher than that coming into last Saturday. Like 35 rushing attempts feels like a decent job committing to the run. It's the 3.6 yards per attempt that make you wonder if they've established the run, because there's a difference between committing to it and establishing it.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, you can commit to it. 35, running the ball 35 times, I think that's pretty much what Ohio State has done. I mean, that's kind of in that same category, but you get more out. You average 6.5 yards a carry. That makes a big difference in your offense, and it affects the passing game and just all the way down. 503 yards of offense Ohio State's averaging, and there's a good balance between run and pass. But you have to be able to do it. You can, Coach Satterfield can commit to it, but you got to have the people to get it done. And I don't know that Nebraska has shown that it's got the people that can get it done.
Well, in reference, Ohio State and Judkins average 7.1 a carry. You have Travion Henderson, who's entering in his 38th year at Ohio State, 8.9 per carry. And then this guy named Peoples is at a measly 4.4.
Very, very modest number there.
Babbers, I want to wind down, and thanks for talking some ball with us. You've seen the fan base react after Bo. You've seen the fan base react after Riley. You saw him lose it after Frost.
Don't forget Callahan.
Oh, Bill Callahan. You've seen him lose their mind after T.O. You've seen him lose their mind after Devaney, or at least you knew that feel. Where does the ire feel and fit right now? Is it closer to a previous era right now? Because the feedback we've gotten with 100 shows and reaction shows and this death march between Indiana and Ohio State is, it wasn't supposed to happen under Matt Rule's watch.
Yeah, I just think the frustration has been there for a good time. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult. Nebraska started off, 5-1. And now you look back and it's like, well, Colorado was probably Nebraska's best effort to this point.
Sure.
But you wouldn't have said that until they played Indiana, because you thought that maybe Indiana was going to be get them bowl eligible and put them in a position where they had some momentum going to Ohio State to where they could be, maybe be competitive. But I just think that the fan frustration, you're watching the games, you have expectations, you bring in a new coach, it's like the first year didn't quite get to where it needed to be, where you hoped it would be, which was bowl eligibility. Now you're in a position where you think, well, it's going to be bowl eligible. And then you look at it and say, are there any guarantees that they're going to be bowl eligible now?
No, I mean, it could go real sideways if they don't approach Saturday the right way and come out of Saturday the right way.
Yeah, and I think they've got the scrap. I think they will. But, man, it's Ohio State, and then you got UCLA, and you focus on UCLA beat Rutgers. You focus on UCLA. It's really one game at a time, although this game, one game at a time, leads you to talk about hot wings instead of the game itself.
Well, if you could magically make Saturday be a win.
Oh yeah.
What would you do to make that happen? Mike, we'll check in again, bud. Appreciate you much.
Thanks, guys.
There he goes. Mike Babcock with us. Garth Glissman coming up at 5 on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Wednesday edition. It's Hail Varsity. I'll be in Columbus tomorrow for Hail Varsity will be at the Marriott there in Columbus. Gear it up for Thursday shows, Friday shows, the weekend edition of Hail Varsity, and yes, Real Red Reaction live from Columbus. We get enough folks hammering a Hot Ones contest. Maybe you will Nebraska to a win or a cover. Maybe?
Maybe that's what we'll do post-game to feel something after the loss, you know?
What are you suggesting?
Hot wings.
My good man.
You know? Is that just me? Okay. I thought it was a good idea.
That's fine. We can do that. I don't know how...
something to make the pain tangible, you know?
Oh, you mean to feel how the fans are feeling?
Yeah, kind of like a masochism type thing, you know?
Wow. Elijah's going to show up to the post-game show with a leather wrestling mask on.
And 10 hot wings.
So Chris is judging Justice's look. We've had some folks in the stream say, Justice looks older because he celebrated his 21st birthday. Justice looks younger per Chris. How was the old 21st?
The old 21st was just fine. I ended up getting off work a little bit early, so after the tacos and margs with the fellas, we went back out. And
good.
We had a good time.
Did you close it down?
I'm gonna
Did
be
you crawl home?
I don't remember half that.
Nah. 21 gotcha.
Yeah, I just kind of remember telling my buddy, I'm not gonna be able to drive. I went back to the Haymarket, picked up my car in the morning. But yeah.
Good on you.
Good work.
What was the drink of choice? Do you remember that?
Everything.
I remember we started the night off with like a bourbon cocktail, and then we got to
start it classy and get trashy.
Yeah, we got to a Dirty Shirley and a Sex on the Beach, and I don't remember much after that. To be totally honest, I do remember playing Mortal Kombat terribly. I do remember.
You didn't do that like in a bar. You were playing video games, right?
Oh, yeah. we went to this like arcade bar in the Haymarket.
No, that's good. Good. No, that's fine. I just was making sure Justice wasn't ripping his shirt off at 1:30 when they said last call.
He thought it was a video game.
Finish him. I was just making sure, dude. You're playing Mortal Kombat. Were you now?
Just a heart ripped out of the chest.
Giant hammered redhead is jumping off the top of the bar.
The final stage was the bartender trying to close my tab.
Yep. There we go. So more stats to get you in the mood for Saturday as a Nebraska fan. Elijah, you've done some research.
Well, I'll give credit. I didn't do some research. This research has been spoon-fed to me by our friend Robert.
Okay, what's Robert say?
Robert dove into the stats all-time Nebraska football with Gus Johnson as the play-by-play commentator, as he will be on Saturday.
Is he counting Oklahoma, too?
Yeah.
Because Gus, saw a quarter of that and then was ill. He missed the call.
I believe that counts because Nebraska...
He was there for kickoff.
Yeah. Any game with Gus Johnson on the call, 0-9 is Nebraska, which sounds bad. But let's dive into the deeper stats. Nebraska, the average score in those games with Gus Johnson on the call, they lose those games 40-17. They've been outscored total 361 to 156. In those games, Nebraska has turned the football over 24 times, and they've only generated 8 takeaways. And on average, the opponent runs up 432 yards of offense against Nebraska while Gus Johnson is on the call.
So the moral of this story is don't go Celtic pride here, please, Nebraska fans. And that's kind of tongue-in-cheek joke.
Oh, one more little stat here for you while Gus Johnson is on the call. The least amount of points that Nebraska has allowed in any of those games would be third in terms of points scored for Nebraska. Do you follow what I'm saying there? I hope that made sense.
No.
So
what's the average score been?
The average score has been 40-17.
Dear Lord. And it wasn't even that good last Saturday.
The real Matthew, supposed to look at Nebraska, says, Gus needs to go. This is about Gus Johnson, not about Nebraska.
Let's turn the anger. Let's turn it around. That's funny. Well, Captain says Matt's offense doesn't run the ball. it's not wrong. It's not that they haven't tried, but it's not been an emphasis or a priority. It's been in the playbook, yeah, because everyone says you got to run the damn ball. But you really have to. And it's been chirped about for a long time. It's been chirped about by a lot of Nebraska fans. It's been chirped about by folks that cover the Big Ten. It's been chirped about by the head man. And you really have to want to do it. And I don't know that his idea of an offense is running the football. 35 attempts a game is fine, and that's a good number for an NFL offense. All right, but this is college football, and just keep at them running the football. The other thing that Saturday and this Saturday do is it makes you question a lot of things with the Purdue win. All right, the Purdue win, great. It's part of the win total, but it isn't that impressive because you got annihilated. The Rutgers win doesn't look as good right now. And it's not Nebraska's fault. They played who they've played. But Colorado's win is looking great. The Illinois overtime is looking amazing, especially we'll see what Illinois does on the road at Rutgers this weekend. And if they hang around or if they get hammered, not sure. I think they'll probably cover. That's a high number. It's around 22 or 23 points. So, no, Nebraska just has to go in to their back half of the season here and into this game Saturday willing to just grind it out, play phone booth football, and get creative with how you run the football.
That's the bigger thing to me, because we talk about Satterfield's comment yesterday. He needs to do better committing to the run. As I kind of laid out with Babbers, I don't think the issue is committing to the run, it's establishing the run, which are two very different things, because as of right now, the book is out on Nebraska, which is that if you go man on a man, hat on a hat in that front seven, they're not going to be able to run the ball with success against you, at least against these Power 5 defenses Nebraska's been playing. When it's hat on a hat, Nebraska picks up a yard or two. If they run the ball again on second down, it's a yard or two, and now you're looking at 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7.
Screwed because here comes a blitz if they want it, or if they were a really good defense, they get home with 4.
And that's the problem is you can either get home with 4, or you go man coverage on the back end, nobody's open, and by the time the 6 guys come, they might even get picked up. Somebody is gonna get off a block and get to the quarterback, because that's just a reality of pass protection. Like, the book is out on Nebraska, and it's not a committing the run problem. It's an establishing the run problem for me.
So how do you want to die on 3rd down?
Yes, that's kind of what I'm saying. Is do you want to
maybe? And he can't come out and say, "Bro, I can't run it with this line. I can't run it with these backs." And he can't be that honest. But maybe we'll see.
It comes down to me is like being more creative with your rushing attack. So whenever the defense is hat on a hat inside, it's not as easy.
Tiger Shark's onto something. Use a bleeping lead blocker. You have a fullback in. The run game's been better. I'll say this as well. Can you be as physical a football team as you want throwing the football versus running the football? We'll wind down this first hour. It's Hail Varsity YouTube channel.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
So, Jeff Snitley in the stream asks an important question: over under on the time in the game you go from beer to whiskey. We'll ask our new 21-year-old. Justice, you're calling that thing on KRNU.
At what point do you go Harry Carey in the booth?
Hello, everybody.
You know, if that thing turns ugly, we might start talking about vintage 70s cartoons just to fill the time. I'd put the
There's
over.
other things
put
in
the
the
over under
70s you
1.5
can go
quarters.
to than cartoons.
That's the more PG option.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Are we going to be smuggling anything into the press box, Schmidt?
Wow. What do you mean?
No, like beer and whiskey.
I don't know Ohio's laws. No.
No, we're not going to Woodstock on this thing.
No, we are not. We will be in Columbus, though, Hail Varsity Road Show tomorrow. We'll be at the Marriott right by the Horseshoe. We did ask, what would you be willing to do if it guaranteed a Nebraska win on Saturday? We've come up with, would you do the Hot Ones Challenge, those 10 wings? We had KG suggest that he'd go on a date with Cindy Crawford. Cindy Crawford now, not vintage Cindy Crawford. It's big of him. Would you have an E. coli burger if it meant a win? No one signed up for that. It's all right. I'm not judging. I'm just asking. Right now, some of us have set our sights for a cover with Nebraska, but we'll be at the Marriott tomorrow for a Hail Varsity 4 o'clock Central Time. Back there for Friday's Hail Varsity show, and then the weekend edition. That'll be another 7:30-ish show, as Elijah will join me in Columbus for Friday and Saturday. Should be pretty good. 489-1240. 489-1240 to get in on the Hail Varsity Radio Network.
Brennan says he'd marry a Hawkeyes fan, which is funny because last I checked, I think he did.
I believe.
Good for you, Brennan.
Well played, Brennan. Well played. You know, I haven't declared. I would do the Hot Ones Challenge. I would. And my ability to handle heat has been pretty good at the moment. The aftermath is another thing. So I'm not as tough as Elijah. I've not done the blazing challenge ever.
Well, I've told you the story of what I had to do the morning after I did the blazing challenge, right?
No, I haven't heard this graphic.
No, it's not graphic. I had to go umpire baseball.
Oh, no.
And that went about as horribly as you can expect with
Was it
90%
humidity?
It wasn't awful. It could have been worse. The big impediment was not the environment. The big impediment was my stomach. That's what was not happy on that Saturday morning umpiring baseball. So 90 seconds in between innings, not enough time.
No, clearly not. Reminder to buckle up and do so. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries only if properly worn. Make it click. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. We'll talk some college football and say hi to our favorite former Husker and Waverly Viking, Garth Glissman, now Associate Commissioner of the SEC. Some football and hoops with G Unit. He'll join us on the stream so can watch this as well as hear us. Hail Varsity YouTube, G Unit coming up. Evan Bland also with us. Good to be with you on a Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity, and you can subscribe Hail Varsity YouTube.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, Tower 2. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. We are all Rhody into Columbus. We are making our way down to SEC headquarters right now. He's the pride of Waverly, former Husker quarterback, former head honcho, one of the head honchos in the NBA, associate commissioner with the SEC. We say hi to Garth Glissman. You follow Garth on Twitter at Garth Glissman. G-Unit in his office. Garth, we need to get some plants, buddy, for the backdrop, or we need a Waverly Viking helmet. Would they allow a Nebraska helmet to be displayed? Or
maybe a picture of me and Schmitty?
Or just no. Garth is going to hit eject here. Oh, I'm having computer problems. So.
You can ask my wife. I'm a proud minimalist. And in fact, that trophy that you see in the back, that was here when I took the job. And I like to keep things simple, be focused on the task at hand, no distractions, come to work every day ready to bring it.
Well, good answer. Well played. Garth Glissman with us. How have you been, man? What's fall been like for you?
It's been a lot of fun. This is my second fall in the SEC. Last year at this time, I was traveling around SEC country trying to get accustomed to a new set of relationships. this fall I've been really focused on two things. One, continuing to try to elevate SEC men's basketball. And then also we implemented the SEC availability reporting policy this year, beginning with football, which is an NFL-like policy that discloses player participation statuses before every conference game. So beginning on the Wednesday night before a Saturday SEC game, along with daily updates leading up to game day, we release whether every SEC player is available or questionable or doubtful, whatever the case may be. That's a new way of thinking in college athletics. Some other conferences have implemented similar policies in the past, but our policy is the first of its kind in terms of requiring reporting on the Wednesday before a Saturday game. It's something I did for many seasons at the NBA. So when I came to the SEC, Commissioner Sankey tasked me with designing and overseeing this policy. And so far it's been a success. Schools have bought in, no issues. Sometimes we get questions about, whether we're caving in to sports betting. It's actually the exact opposite. It's intended to protect student athletes from the risks associated with sports betting, specifically the demand for inside information. It's really the same logic behind requirements that mandate publicly traded companies to disclose financial information on a quarterly basis. Without transparency, people inside, whether it's a company or inside a football program, have access to information that has value either in the stock market or the sports betting market, which is increasingly now legal in our country. And the best remedy for that inside information is transparency. Eliminates the value of what otherwise, as I mentioned, could have value in the betting markets. And so we think we're taking a step forward to protect the integrity of competition, our student athletes. And although it's a new way of thinking in college athletics, I think it'll become increasingly mainstream in the near term.
Garth, how hard to ask was that with some of the SEC coaches when it comes to the availability policy and just the gamesmanship that not only the SEC but a lot of big-time conferences, coaches in general are control freaks that want you to know info when they want you to know info.
Historically, as you know, Chris, Elijah, Justice, coaches held on to that information for competitive and tactical reasons. If your starting quarterback's your status was in question, and you could keep that secret from the media up to game time, that would put your team at a competitive advantage because your opponent had to game plan for, the starter and the backup. So it represents a shift in thinking. For me, I spent, as you know, Chris, 7.5 years at the NBA. About 6 years, I oversaw the NBA's injury reporting policy. So I had all that experience, and then I was able to kind of bring it to the SEC and build a policy from the ground up. And one of the things that I appreciate about college athletics is there's really this educational ethos. And so the NBA, the policy had been in effect. I oversaw the policy there, but it was really matter of fact, follow the policy or be fined. But in the SEC, what we've really tried to do is approach this with the spirit of educating coaches and student athletes about the importance of the policy. So we worked in partnership with our schools to design the policy. And then what I've really enjoyed, and Chris, you know this because I coached high school basketball for many years in the state of Nebraska, we send continuing education on a weekly basis, highlighting key takeaways from the week before and specific examples from our conference that other programs can follow if similar circumstances arise in the future.
It's Garth Glissman with us here on Hail Varsity Radio as Garth doing work down in SEC country. And Garth, you just were appointed to the NCAA Men's Basketball Oversight Committee. I think that's great news. Awesome to see a Nebraskan doing that. Want to get some of your thoughts, what you want from that role, what some of your ideas are for the future of college basketball as you kind of oversee the sport as a whole.
I appreciate the question, Elijah. I'm excited to play a role in shaping the future of college basketball. Whether I was coaching at Parkview Christian, working at the NBA, or now serving on the NCAA Oversight Committee, I've always tried to help strengthen this game that has transformed the lives of so many young people in the country. I'll speak for myself. Sports taught me how to work, taught me how to believe in something bigger than myself. And my appointment to the committee comes at an opportune time. America's developmental system in basketball, once the envy of the world, is lagging behind other countries, particularly in Europe. So much has changed in the sport landscape and society in general. And when you're talking about college basketball and then ultimately the NBA, you're kind of talking about the end of the funnel. One topic I know that's been top of mind for Nebraska sports fans lately is what's happening in high school sports, and participation levels, including at some large urban high schools, have declined significantly in recent years. You have Class A football teams that are forfeiting games. You have large Class A schools that are having to forfeit entire seasons in girls basketball. And so when I talk about the developmental ecosystem, it's everything that folds into the pathway for a player to college basketball or the NBA. And that includes socioeconomic circumstances, demographic changes, and of course the rise of club sports. AAU basketball, I think, has had a unique impact on basketball in this country. And you compare the American developmental ecosystem up against the system in other countries, one of the reasons that Europe is outperforming is the way that those players train. They train beginning at a young age in a manner that would resemble the American ecosystem of decades prior, with the exception that they also, in Europe, get the benefit of playing with older players, in some cases professionalizing at a young age. So I'm excited to take, the lens of my experiences from being a high school coach all the way up to the NBA to do everything I can to help college basketball. Another issue I'm focused on from a college basketball standpoint is scheduling. And you'll appreciate this, Chris, Elijah. So many of your listeners this time of year, they expect to hear about football. And one of the reasons that basketball needs to be focused on scheduling is the broader changes to the overall sports calendar. I love football. You know that. Chris, how many, literally, over 100 high school games I'm sure we broadcast over the years.
A lot of Friday nights, man.
A lot of Friday nights together. That's why I was never married into my 30s.
Me too.
And that's why I stayed married into my 30s. I was gone on Friday nights.
We were a good team in many respects. So I love football. You know that. But the NFL and college football have continued to expand their seasons. The NFL is now at 17 regular season games. They play games on more days of the week. They're constantly looking for more windows. College football playoff has expanded. This year, the playoff will start December 20th. It will end January 20th. If you think about it, that's encroaching upon college basketball's traditional footprint. That's eating into about 3 weeks of the year that historically was devoted to conference basketball season. Elijah, you're a little younger, but when Chris and I were growing up,
it's Big Monday, brother.
The college football season had a nice, neat ending. Bowl games ended on January 1st. And then in more recent years, you'd have some games that would trickle into maybe the first week of the new year. You might have the championship game that would be January 10th or thereabouts. But now we have a 12-team playoff that will spread into the third week in January. And so that is encroaching upon college basketball schedule. It's also encroaching upon the NBA schedule. While the NBA has taken some steps to try to recalibrate its regular season schedule, the college basketball schedule has largely stayed the same, Chris, since you and I were kids. And I think that we need to be more strategic, think about it with some fresh ideas, a willingness to innovate, to recognize the ratings juggernaut that is the NFL and college football, and then from a college basketball standpoint, try to strategically position our sport in new windows to optimize our appeal to fans.
Garth, the windows that I grew up with college basketball, and you played for Nebraska. I got to go to a ton of games in the old Wild West of the Big Eight with some of Danny Nee's greatest teams. And it was Big Monday where you'd have Alonzo Mourning or somebody like that from Georgetown playing at 6. They'd lead right into the 8 o'clock tip-off on a Big Monday just with ESPN. Then you'd have your Big West nightcap on a Monday. And then you'd have your money time slots on a Saturday at 1. And you still have that. But you have so many different networks in play here to put together a good schedule. Must see, right? Must see regular season basketball, even though the NCAA tournament is what a lot of folks turn their attention. Sundays, 3 o'clock, right? Your CBS game has always been really, really strong. So what kind of plan can you put in place to win some of those eyeballs back?
Well, like so many things, Chris, when you and I were kids, life was just so much simpler.
I know.
And
3 channels and some cable.
Seasons fit into these nice, clean compartments, and you would transition from college football bowl season. It would end January 1, and then it was a nice transition into conference basketball season. And like so many aspects of society, things have become much more complex. And to football's credit, both college football and the NFL have continued to evolve in the way they've positioned their sport to optimize their appeal to fans. And having worked in a league office setting now for about the last 9 years, it's conventional league office thinking that you want to try to maximize your calendar footprint to optimize your mind share among fans. The more time throughout the year that you occupy the sports calendar, the better it is for your league. The NFL has done that as better than any league in the United States. College football has continued to evolve as well, most recently with the new playoff. But as I mentioned, college basketball has largely been stagnant, and the format of our season hasn't changed materially since you and I were kids. And so how do we go about fixing that? We have to think about ways to get fans thinking about college basketball earlier in the season, because you're not going to go head-to-head with the NFL and beat them from a rating standpoint. You're not going to go head-to-head with the college football playoff from a rating standpoint and prevail, nor would we want to. We expect to have a lot of SEC schools in the college football playoff, as you can imagine.
Looks good now.
You have to find new windows, which is probably earlier in the season. They may no longer be weekend windows. Maybe it's weeknights when the football calendar is calmer. But holistically, basketball has to work harder to get attention than ever before.
Garth, I got about 2 minutes, and we'll get you out. Appreciate you much.
We're good.
I want to ask you about your relationship with Dylan Raiola, and really the first family in Nebraska. Dylan heads to Ohio State this weekend, but pretty big-time freshman year for Dylan to come in and navigate Nebraska's offense. Well,
as you know, Chris, in my position, I'm focused on macro issues rather than specific teams. But I'm still a human being, and I still have relationships. And I've known Dominic Raiola for over 20 years. And Dominic, even though we were never teammates, he would come back and work out with us. And I was like, fourth, fifth string walk-on quarterback when I met him. But he was always very kind to me. And so I've gotten to know Dylan through Dominic. And Dylan is a special young man. He's a captivating talent, and he is wired differently. And that's the best compliment that I can give a young athlete. That's one thing I learned at the NBA. Elite athletes are wired differently than the rest of society. Dylan fits into that category, and he has a chance to be a transcendent player for Nebraska. And so on a personal level, I'm rooting for him very much. He's a captivating talent, and I think he has a chance to be the most impactful Nebraska football player in the last 2 or 2.5 decades.
Yep. We'll see how things go on Saturday, Nebraska at Ohio State. Do you get about 30 seconds? Do you get much chance to keep an ear at Nebraska, football?
Well, of course, I'm always going to love my alma mater and home state. I have been traveling to a lot of SEC football games recently. I've been to Ole Miss, Georgia, Oklahoma, Missouri, South Carolina.
So you get to go to all the sweet SEC games.
I'd love to see Garth in the Grove.
Well, I took my wife and kids to that one, so they got to experience the Grove, but I was working. Certainly every SEC program has incredible tradition and pageantry, and so I'm thankful to be experiencing it.
Guys, we're thankful for you, bud. Pride of Waverly, former Husker, Associate Commissioner of the SEC. Garth, you take care. Thanks for the time today.
Appreciate you having me on.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Elijah Herbel. Justice is back, and he may rip his sleeves off. He is going to Columbus as well. We say hi to Evan Bland with the Omaha World Herald at Evan Bland OWH. When do you take off, dude?
Flying out Friday afternoon, getting in kind of a late arrival Friday night in Columbus, and quick turnaround in the morning.
So you're going Signetti route, huh?
Yeah, that's right. It'll be the flight back will be a little better. I think we're direct on Sunday, maybe, but
we'll probably see you then.
Okay, yeah, it'll be a fun little cruise back to Omaha.
Yeah,
Evan's gonna sit down in his seat. Oh God, I'm next to Schmidt and Elijah. Oh dear God.
Stewardess,
can I get a seat change? No, as long as it's by I don't care. That's all good.
Stewardess, I'd like to report this man.
This guy's raw dogging over here on the aisle.
No, that's so wrong.
No screen, no headphones, no nothing. That kind of raw dog is what we're referring to.
So, tell me about Nebraska football, Evan. Help!
Evan, in terms of packing essentials for this trip, what are you thinking? Like, I was sitting down, cigarettes, a blindfold, maybe a pint of whiskey. What are you packing?
I mean, if this is like 1950s flight, yeah, sure. I'm bringing my silverware for the steak dinner and the hot towel after a piece of pie. Yeah, that all sounds pretty good. Now, I'm pretty low maintenance, man. These like football weekend flights, you have a little go bag and laptop and all that, and pretty low maintenance, quite honestly. Like, it's easier to go to these than it is to do like a family vacation. You know what I mean? So should be pretty quick. And I'm not you can't even have peanuts on flights anymore because people have allergies. So maybe I don't know, whatever it would be, like animal crackers or something at this point is probably the best thing to look forward to.
Well, we have a question out for today, and gonna ask you, and put a fan hat on. None of us root. We just kind of want interesting. That being said, would you rather appear on Hot Ones, the wing-eating YouTube show, or eat a contaminated quarter pounder with cheese if it meant a win Saturday for Nebraska?
Right. Mm-hmm. So which one of those would you do for a Nebraska win? Well, I mean, I suppose I'd go for the hot wings, as long as you get a glass of milk. And I don't know how long that kind of that burn lasts, hours maybe. So I think I would take that over whatever burn may come from a contaminated quarter pounder. That consequence could maybe last or endure a little bit longer. So give me the hot wings, I suppose, and that'd be a heck of a story if Nebraska were to go into Ohio State and find a way. Kind of reminiscent of 2018 a little bit when they almost did it against Urban Meyer's crew, kind of out of nowhere with a freshman quarterback, incidentally, at that time. So you never know. You never say never. That's why they play these things. I don't think anyone saw last week's result coming either. I'm not predicting anything, but I guess give me the hot wings and a pretty good story.
What factors, Evan, give you pause on Saturday to think that Nebraska could pull it off? Because we all watched last week. We all know how bad it was. We've also talked about how the Big Ten's a week-to-week league, and you know what? Indiana had Nebraska's number big time last week. It's week-to-week, though. Anything can happen in college football. The pulling off the upset, maybe not impossible, but it seems highly unlikely. What factors do you lay out in terms of why you don't think it's going to happen?
Why I don't think the upset's going to happen? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, the special teams hasn't been consistent. There hasn't been much of a run game that Nebraska's been able to put together, whether it's willing to run the ball or able. Like, it just hasn't happened in that regard. I think the explosive plays haven't been there. Like, I think when you look at ingredients for an upset, one of the things needs to be like the underdog needs to find a way to be explosive, rip off a 70-yard touchdown run, or be able to go over the top deep, or get a pick six. Like, you need to have those sort of quick strikes that can take momentum and that don't necessarily require you to win, on an 11-play drive against one of the nation's best defenses, but that kind of allow you to get points elsewhere. And I just haven't seen that from Nebraska. We haven't really seen signs that special teams is going to steal points or field position. We haven't really seen signs that the offense has that explosive capability. They might be able to drive it down once or twice against Ohio State with some of the weapons that they have, but I think that's a big ask to do that against a Buckeyes group that maybe with the exception of a chunk of the game at Oregon 2 weeks ago has been really good in most phases. I think the defense needs to be the thing that would really have to be stout for Nebraska to have a chance to force some takeaways and tackle like they did in some of the games, Rutgers and Purdue and a couple of the others. But Nebraska just hasn't been able to put a lot of that together at the same time, and certainly not together for 4 quarters. So while it's not impossible that there would be an upset, man, I think you have to see a surprise somewhat on par with what we saw in the opposite direction last week against Indiana for it to happen.
Evan Bland with us, Omaha World Herald, Hail Varsity Radio. You mentioned the willing or able, that run game, and Sat's got some arrows here the last 24 hours, not only play, per yard plays, let alone the run game commitment. And, we'll just see where Nebraska's head at is offensively on Saturday and then moving forward with November that looms. But, what do you think Nebraska's biggest problem is right now, Evan? Do you believe it's confidence, or is it just identity? Really trying to drill down and know what you want to do.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of a lot of that. And we heard it in the press conference Tuesday. Like, to me, that's a team that's just kind of trying to figure it out and trying to figure out, okay, we're trying to move the ball on the ground. What's that even going to look like? Like, what's the willingness level to have a conventional run game with your running backs? Because it's not going to happen in a lot of other ways. They don't have the quarterback threat, mobility threat that they've had in a lot of years in the past. That's been almost nothing for them. And they've tried to make up for it with Heinrich Harburg coming out in Wildcat looks, but that becomes a pretty obvious play when you see him come onto the field, what Nebraska's going to do. There's not a ton of deception there. And then the kind of the end arounds or the sweeps that they've done with Barney have worked on occasion still, but I think the defenses are certainly more prepared for that as well. So it's a tough spot where, if you believe that you can get 3, 4, 5 yards a pop on the ground, I think you do that. And, Marcus Satterfield was brutally honest with the media on Tuesday about his philosophy or his perspective, I guess, on that. And to me, what stood out was he said it was not a matter for him of patience, of this idea of, let's stick with it, but it was more a matter of trust and trust that Nebraska can get into the right plays, that they can attack the right edges, that they can get guys in space to be able to make plays. And then when it has happened, it's been hard for Nebraska ball carriers to shake tackles or to make a cutback. And we saw a lot of that from Indiana last week. I think that was part of the reason that game was so frustrating, was the things that Nebraska's wanted to do in the run game, Indiana was able to do, in part because of execution, in part because of playmakers, in part because of the timing of some of the calls that they put out there, and it all added up to a really explosive run game. Nebraska's still kind of working through that. I'm in the camp that this game, even if Nebraska is not close to winning it in the second half, I don't think this can be a game where you get blown out like you did last week. I think this needs to be a game where if you lose by 4 touchdowns, but you played hard and you didn't make a ton of mistakes, then you carry that over into November, and you have 4 winnable games in November against teams that have been up and down. And I think Nebraska could win all of those games, or any of those games, if things were to play out well. I wonder, though, how much that would test the morale and the confidence if you go and you lose by 50 points again by being too aggressive. So I think regardless of whether Nebraska's ripping off big runs or not, it's got to be a bigger part of their game plan this week, if for no other reason than to shorten the game and to give them a look at what the recipe is going to be to have to win games next month.
Evan Bland with us here, Omaha World Herald, Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, as we wind things down here, another comment made by Satterfield that's made the rounds. I'm sure you know where I'm going. He's asked about the yards per play, and he said between 4 and 6. And it's gotten so much publicity that it's even been suggested that we name our show the Marcus Satterfield Show, because we're on from 4 to 6. I want to get your thoughts, because I've seen it kind of in my own head 2 ways. One being the old football coaches in my life that said, hey, 4 yards is a win because 4 times 3 is 12. That's a first down. But on the flip side of things, it's a coordinator that didn't know the yards per play of his own offense and doesn't know where the leaders in that category are across the country. What's your reaction to that? Is that overblown or is that serious cause for concern, that answer?
Well, I think we're probably going to find more clarity in the coming days. Maybe Matt Rule will speak to this Thursday. I think it's possible that what he is thinking about is kind of the first part of your thought there, Elijah, which is this idea that would they be happy with 4 yards a play if they were to get steadily 4 yards a play, and I think you would be for the reasons that you laid out. But the only other thing I can think of when you're talking about maybe what his mindset was in that moment is like sometimes some of those kinds of stats aren't front of mind for a coordinator. It might be something else. It might be success rate. It might be third down conversions. It might be, run pass balance. I know a popular metric out there is yards per point, or how many yards typically it's going to take you to score a point and to get a touchdown. And so I think it's possible that that's more of the metric that they use, and that yards per play maybe isn't a big part of that, which is, it could be a reason that he was caught off guard there. But I don't know that for sure. It doesn't look great, as you said, when your offensive coordinator isn't sure of that or kind of what the standard is in college football right now. But again, like he's got 5 games the rest of this season to where Nebraska can make an impression one way or the other. If they come out and move the ball against Ohio State, I think you can make up for a lot of some of the miscues and the sluggish games that they've had to this point. They're playing some very high end defenses, so you're not going to sort of fall into a lot of easy yards or easy points the rest of the way. They're going to have to earn it. And so whether he knows what the typical number of yards per play is for an average college football team, if Nebraska comes out and moves the ball, I think this becomes a footnote. If it doesn't, then I think this eventually could be one of those moments that you look at that doesn't reflect super positively on their 7-figure coordinator.
Evan, we'll see you in Columbus. Always appreciate the time, bud.
Thanks, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. We welcome in a Jock Doc Wednesday, Dr. Brandon Seifert. Nebraska Orthopedic Center, a Jock Doc Wednesday. And Dr. Brandon, tough one for Chris Godwin of Tampa. Having a great season, potentially his final season in Tampa. And he needs surgery, dislocated ankle, Dr. Brandon. Let's dive into not only how just difficult this injury is, but also the recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. So not something I think we've talked much about on here before. Maybe one other time we had a dislocated ankle on here. But let's kind of talk nuts and bolts about, what is a dislocated ankle. So dislocated ankle, essentially the ankle joint itself has 2 kind of main components to it. There's the top part, the shin or the tibia, has kind of a rounded portion on the top of the ankle, and then the bottom part of the ankle is the dome, which is called the talus. And those 2 form the vast majority of the ankle joint. There's also a small bone to the outside called the fibula that's also part of it. What happens with the dislocation typically is the dome-shaped bone on the bottom basically pops out of place, and then those 2 bones kind of basically separate. And so in order to do that, it takes a ton of force to do that. So you have to have pretty high level of energy force to do that, to basically dislocate the ankle. And usually when if those excessive forces happen, usually something else has to happen along with it to have the ankle basically go out of place. And usually it means fracture, whether it means just the small bone, the fibula fractures and it dislocates, or oftentimes it'll kind of go around the whole ankle joint itself and you'll fracture off kind of that bump that's on the inside of your ankle called the medial malleolus. If you're really unlucky, you'll break both of those, and you'll also kind of tear through the ligament that we call the syndesmosis ligament. That's the ligament that holds both of those bones, the fibula and the tibia, together. And so that's kind of that whole injury spectrum. We're not certain as to what exactly he all injured here with this dislocated ankle, but I would think it's safe to assume at least the small bone on the outside was fractured, and then the question is what other structures were injured along the way that need to be fixed.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here at Jock Doc Wednesday, talking Chris Godwin. If you still had the game on, you saw the injury on Monday night. It was pretty clear immediately. His ankle, it's not supposed to look like that. Everyone kind of thought fracture when they say dislocation. Dr. Brandon says, well, likely it's probably both. Take me through, Dr. Brandon, in terms of complications. You can have somebody fracture an ankle a la Schmidt hanging his foot out the golf cart, but then you have this where it's clearly deformed, it's clearly looking not right. Is there an added, recovery timetable that you need to account for whenever you have something that is both a dislocation and potentially a fracture as well?
Yeah, there really is. Just because as you get to that next level, that dislocation level, you really start to add on just a lot of other kind of injuries on top of it. So it's just kind of that higher level of trauma leading to kind of a longer recovery time. Again, of course, it depends on what you have to fix. And then obviously, as you kind of go through that spectrum of, how do you manage these? There's the acute on the field moment where that dislocates. You want to try to get that back in as soon as you can. So I'll reduce these or put these back in on the field right away. And then you get it in a splint. And then, of course, you get off to the hospital and take x-rays with it. And then from there, obviously, some surgical planning is usually in order.
Dr. Brandon, one of our esteemed streamers says, my leg didn't look like Joe Theismann's. No, I did not dislocate my ankle. I just busted the outside of it. But Godwin's, when you look at the fact, is it always a surgical choice? Or I shouldn't even say choice. Is it always surgery that has to happen, Dr. Brandon, if you dislocate your ankle? Because I think of Tony Finau, popped his ankle back in, down to the Augusta, and away we go.
Bingo, and that's it right there. I was just going to use that example. So if you are somebody like him who has really lax joints, there's a term for it. It's kind of a spectrum called Ehlers-Danlos, where you have really lax joints. You can actually slip your joints out of place very easily. So like Tony Finau, when he had his, you just saw him kind of give that a little shimmy and it went back into place. Somebody that's that kind of ligamentously lax, then yes, they can usually put it back into place, and they typically don't fracture when that happens. Clearly, it's not good for your ankle to do that because you're going to damage some of the cartilage. But from a surgical perspective, at least not from a bony perspective, would he need surgery. But he would benefit if he keeps having that happen. For example, Tony keeps having that happen, then he would have to think about at some point some type of soft tissue tightening procedure where you tighten that up so it just doesn't dislocate. In this scenario, this really traumatic dislocation in this scenario, it's pretty darn rare to not fracture something in addition to having the dislocation.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us here at Jock Doc Wednesday. Chris Godwin, our topic. And Dr. Brandon, I'll use the personal example here, and it's a completely different spot of the body. I'll show the viewers on stream. I dislocated my pinky back in high school. It's still crooked to this day. Is there anything like that happens whenever the ankle dislocates? Is there any permanent damage that's going to be hard for them to fix no matter what they do? Because that seems to be the story with my pinky. I asked, can you straighten it out? And they said, well, no.
Kind of interesting. So as you have dislocations in various parts of your body, it's interesting how different joints respond to that. So, for example, if you dislocate your shoulder, well, then it tends to be just kind of looser over time, and it tends to be easier to keep re-dislocating that, if you will. If you dislocate your elbow, traditionally those get pretty tight, and it's actually usually a lot more difficult to dislocate it later because it gets really tight, although not impossible depending on what you do initially with your treatment. Ankle's kind of the same way. If you have that one kind of big traumatic dislocation of your ankle, again, usually there's a fracture that's involved. Usually surgery happens in that scenario. You tend to form a lot of scar tissue, so you tend to be kind of less unstable after an event like that just because you tend to be more stiff. And it tends to be really hard to get your motion back, especially if you involve surgery. You just tend to form more scar tissue. You're more stiff after surgery. So you actually kind of go the opposite direction, typically in these big traumatic ankle dislocations.
Dr. Brandon, at wide receiver, that spot is so important you need it all. You need speed, you need physicality, you need grace, you need agility. And you just kind of laid out the issue with that. Have you seen a lot of guys come back from this in the NFL when they do dislocate their ankle?
Yeah, and so there's not a ton in terms of the sample size out there, but yes, you absolutely can make it back. I think this is one of the longer recoveries to kind of come back from. So I think that first year for sure, when you come back after these, you're just not looking amazing. Just that stiffness is still there. You're trying to still figure out kind of that agility piece, just still kind of working up to speed in terms of the cutting and the speed part of it. But as you kind of get into year two, you tend to see them come back and look a lot better. So this is, even though he'll be back, within a year, they tend to not look great until kind of year two. And then I think that potential is still, he's so athletic, so talented. I think that potential is still very high, that he gets back and plays at a high level. A lot of this, like we've talked about, like with the knee, it really boils down to, what else happened with this injury. So if it's purely ligamentous and a fracture, you can easily fix those. I think you'll do really well. Where you start to run into trouble with these, just like the knee, is when you start to have damage to that cartilage, that joint smooth surface. When you start to chip off or knock off big chunks of that, that's when it really starts to kind of derail the career. It's just hard to fully recover through those because you always are just kind of achy, sore with your rehab, with your going back to cutting clay, that kind of stuff. And so that'll be the big question mark for him, is if he had some big chondral damage.
Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Chris Godwin, our topic. Dr. Brandon, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for the time today.
Okay, fellas. Take care.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time on a Wednesday. Wheels up tomorrow morning. We'll be live in Columbus tomorrow at the Ohio State Marriott, getting ready for Nebraska and the Buckeyes Saturday. So we'll have a string of shows live tomorrow afternoon, 4 to 6 Central. Hail Varsity Roadshow Thursday, Hail Varsity Roadshow Friday. Weekend edition, 7:30 Central to about 9:30 Central, before we mosey on over to the shoe. And then Real Red Reaction. We'll be able to bring you all the post-game thoughts and the good, the bad, the ugly of whatever happens on Saturday. And that'll get going around 2:30 Central. So we'll be there, take you into the evening. And then Elijah and I will hoof it back Sunday and be ready for another Monday edition. We'll sneak in a Average Joe pod tonight for you, getting ready for Nebraska, Ohio State. We'll sneak in a live, maybe moved up, Average Joe pod Sunday morning while we'll be in Columbus.
Yeah, and what's beautiful about the direct flight back to Omaha is it lands at 2 o'clock. The Broncos game starts at 3:20. I'll be back on my couch just in time. I should be knocking on wood here because I know how flights go. And Schmidt, I know your history with flight delays. I tend to avoid all of those. I'm really good. I'm really good about not getting flights delayed or canceled. It happened once to me.
Because you're sneaking out Friday between our local KFOR morning show and the Friday afternoon show.
Yeah. So we're hoping my luck carries on. The only time I've ever had a flight totally canceled, and we had to, they booked us a hotel and we had to stay overnight and take the first flight out, was back in my youth.
They did that for you?
Yeah, because what
was that like?
On our flight was the entire Memphis swimming and diving team, I want to say, and this was during Derrick Rose's fantastic run when he was at Memphis, if you remember way back when. So remember,
we want to get into how
they were all excited about Derrick Rose.
D Rose got into Memphis or no?
I have not heard.
There's a lot
He's
of
very
things.
talented. And
No, clearly, but you still gotta. This may get me sued. So there are rumors floating about old D Rose and entrance exams. Maybe a little Christopher Moltisanti treatment.
That's a reality of college sports, if we're just going to be honest with ourselves. If you're good enough, they'll get you into institutions.
Yeah.
That's how things go.
Justice, you're grinning. I think you know this story.
I've heard the rumors that have been floating around with Mr. Rose,
right,
and several.
And if they're just rumors, it could have been Justice, being D Rose, taking the essay or ACT.
I love the show Suits. You seen that one?
Yes.
Yes. Where they pay the guy to go in there and take the bar exam for everybody.
Kent emails in, Chris@HailVarsity.com. People actually want to watch the Broncos play.
Above 500. Hey, they're above 500. That's a win for the Broncos if you've watched the past decade. And they got the Panthers on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to maybe watching a Broncos victory.
You know, what's the Broncos home schedule look like?
The Broncos home schedule?
The rest of the way, because I might have to tap into old pharmacist Jeff, and we got to get out to Donkeyland.
See, they host the Falcons coming up here. When you get into December after Husker football season, they do host the Chiefs on January 5th. Final game of the season. Other than that, they got the Colts, the Browns, the Falcons, and that's it.
Okay. ATL would be kind of fun.
Kind of got out there for that Chiefs game.
You ever crash at the old Red Lion, the old Mile High? They had a bar at the top floor. We'll talk to you from Columbus tomorrow.